Hey folks, welcome back. Today we're going to do things a little different because it's really nasty outside, so I thought I'd sit inside where it's nice and warm and talk to you. I'll pour you a cup of coffee in a minute. It's nice and hot because, well, we had a blizzard last weekend. It's been cold and windy all week, and well, even today the forecast was supposed to be for not bad temperatures, but holy smokes, is it windy. Even though it stopped snowing a couple of days ago, the drifting that we've been having, and then, well, actually this morning it did snow for a little bit. We haven't even finished cleaning up the last mess. That's terrible. Anyhow, not here to talk about the weather. Here to talk about horses, because that's what we do. We talk about horses. And I want to talk about getting bold and trying things. Don't be timid when it comes to trying things with your horse. And, that applies a lot to training because of the fact that, a lot of people are scared of screwing up their horse. Don't worry. Horses are actually pretty forgiving, and even if you do make a mistake, you can fix it. You can learn better and do better. I mean, I know I got 4 of them I've been messing up with and fixing, and, well, it can be done. So, don't be scared of trying things. Get bold. Step out of your comfort zone and do something you've never done before. And you'll be surprised after a while it gets a lot easier. Now, on that note, though, I want to talk about trimming a bit because, well, I'd mentioned before I was out looking for an angle grinder, and we got one now, cordless. And as you can see, there's no blade on it yet because we don't want a dangerous machine around because at this moment, we're just desensitizing the horses to this noisy little thing, and that's coming along. But because of this thing, I started thinking about, what? I had to do a video about trimming because, well, I don't know, a lot of people aren't going to want to even hear about it because they don't want to trim their own horses because it's darn hard work and it's rather intimidating. You figure, man, I might screw up, I might hurt that horse, or, well, there's one lady that just started boarding here, and she's got a couple performance horses that, she competes and shows with, and it's pretty important that they're not lame. And, her biggest fear is if she trims her own horses, she'll end up laming her horse. Well, I keep trying to encourage her that that's not going to happen. Don't worry. And I'm going to explain a little to you why. Is you really got to mess up bad to lame a horse. Believe me, if you follow just a few tiny guidelines, you're not going to lame a horse. That's pretty hard to do, actually. If you just follow a few very, very, very simple little guidelines that anybody can do, I mean, and I do mean anybody, and I'll get to that in a minute. I want to talk about some of the advantages of trimming your own horse. Now, first off, well, you don't have to be making phone calls and making appointments, showing up when the farrier shows up to do the trim, and then trying to keep it all organized and everything, and it's a lot of work. And, well, then there's the financial aspect. That costs money. Trims, well, good ones aren't cheap. And, well, a lot of you don't really want to have to fork out the money constantly for trims. Don't blame you. And there's good financial reason to do your own because in spite of the fact things like, well, say a pair of nippers, they're like, well, close, just under $200 for a new pair. I don't know, maybe you can find some that are even more. I don't know. There not a lot of different brands out there, but there's a couple that are relatively new to town here, and I haven't checked out the prices on them, but they do have a reputation for, well, they might be a little more expensive. They are good quality from what I've heard, but I'm not going to go there. But anyhow, so by the time you've got everything, you might be forking out maybe $300 for everything. And some of the stuff you got to have anyhow, like a hoof pick and a good brush, things like that. Even if you don't do your own trims, you should have that stuff. Shame on you if you don't. So Well, depending on how much they charge, I've heard somebody saying that they charge up to 55. I've never seen anybody charge that much, unfortunately. I think they should charge even more. It's a dangerous job, especially if you don't know the horse you're working on. Well, I'm not going to go there. I'll get on a rant about that stuff. But, one of the advantages of doing your own trims is after about a half a dozen trims, all your tools are paid for. So anything after that, financially, you're going to be money ahead. And, well, the nippers, they'll probably last your lifetime if you only got one horse. Rasp, even though they do wear out after time, might still last you 5, 10 years. So, I mean, not a big deal. So from a financial standpoint, it's definitely worth it to do your own trims. Now, if you're not concerned about the money, there's still other reasons. Like I said, it's a lot less hassle. You don't have to get on the phone and make appointments and show up for them and everything else. Well, one of the things I really like is it's just a whole lot more convenient if I pick up the hoof and I clean in it, and all of a sudden I'm noticing, I think you're due for a trim. I just go grab the tools and give them a trim. That's it. Done. Don't have to mess around. And I've always felt strongly that it's, and I'm not going to lay a guilt trip on anybody saying this is what you should be doing, but I've always felt very strongly that as a horse owner, it's my obligation to be able to care for that horse in every way possible, which includes being able to do the trims. I'm not that great. I'm honest about that. I'm not no professional, but I've been trimming my own horses for I think close to 10 years, and I got 4 of them now that I do. So it's not like I've never trimmed a horse. I know how to do it. Not real well though. I mean, if there's some serious issues, I will be calling in some help, somebody with a lot more experience than me, and don't be afraid to do that ever. One of the other things that again, it goes back to the convenience thing. I'm thinking of an incident. It wasn't all that long ago, and somebody's horse had stepped on who knows what, maybe a rock or something, kind of knocked a big chunk out of their hoof. Well, if you trim them often, that's less likely to happen anyhow. And if you do your own, it's easier to do it often. It doesn't cost you as much. In fact, it doesn't cost you anything but your time. But if you got one hoof, has a chunk out of it, and it really needs to be tended to before it gets worse. Well, now they got to get a hold of somebody on short notice and get them to come out and look after one hoof. Well, most of them aren't going to want to do that. Well, chances are they'll probably do 2 just to keep them balanced up. But they might just charge them for all 4 anyhow, even if they don't do anything, just because they had to drive all the way out. They sure aren't going to do that for the cost of one hoof. I guarantee that. So, being able to look after your horse, being able to take care of it in case of emergencies, the convenience, the financial thing. There's just a lot of reasons to be able to do your own. And, I was going to say, if you just follow a few little guidelines, you don't need to be so scared about screwing up. Now, I'll give you a few little tips here that just, it all started out for me. Years ago, I was reading an article that said, even a bad trim is better than no trim. Well, I'm sure it is possible to do it bad enough that it'd be better off to have no trim, but I think the concept that they were getting at was horses that don't get trimmed regularly and get neglected with overgrown hooves have far greater risk of, cracks and chips and that sort of thing, obviously, but even mechanical founder, things like that. If the horse's hooves aren't being regularly tended to, you can have all kinds of problems. So from that standpoint, it makes sense, and I kind of understand it. And again, the even a bad trim is better than no trim. That kind of goes back to what I said. It's hard to really screw up that bad that it's really going to be a serious issue. You'd almost have to work at it to lame a horse. I've never seen it happen. I heard of it happening. And it was a case of somebody got way too aggressive with a knife. And, that's one of my little tips is don't use one. Never. Nature doesn't use one. They wear off the sole and the frogs just fine. So the only thing you really need to tend to is the hoof wall. A pair of nippers and a rasp will take care of that. Don't even need to use a knife. I own one, but I'll tell you, very, very seldom I ever use it for anything. It's there just in case I need it for something. It's there. But I generally don't use it. So that's tip number one is just don't use a knife. That can save you an awful lot of grief right there. Well, second tip is just go conservative. Don't get too carried away when you're trimming. Just do a little bit at a time. If it's not enough, you can always go back and do some more. You know, and this is where one of the things that I used to do. I don't do it anymore. I probably should still do it, but I think is very, very helpful, especially when you first start out trimming, is take pictures, lots of pictures, different angles, right down by the ground at ground level. Get a nice clean piece of plywood or something if you're working in a really bad place where you don't have a nice solid surface. Just take a piece of plywood, lay it down and put the hoof on, and that way you can get a little better look at it in comparison to a true ground. And you can take pictures from down low, sitting on that, take pictures of the bottom, the front, all different angles, and then take them home. And instead of looking at them at your itty-bitty screen on your phone, download those pictures into your computer and then blow them up the size of your computer screen. And, you get a lot more detail, and you can see if you're making mistakes, need a little more, a little less. And if it needs a little fixing up, you can always go back the next day and, take care of things there. It's really quite simple. So just be conservative. Don't take too much. You can always take a little more. Don't use a knife. And you know what? You're never going to lame your horse. And I really feel a whole lot better being able to do my own trims because, like I said, every time I pick up a hoof, if it looks like it needs to be done, grab my tools and do it. That's simple. Don't have to make phone calls. Don't have to make appointments. Don't have to, another trip out just to go be there and then pay somebody else to do something I'm perfectly capable of doing. Now, like I said, if you got more serious problems, don't be scared to call for help. I would strongly encourage you to do that. But don't feel obligated to use somebody else for basic maintenance trims. That's stuff you can do yourself. And like I said, I've always felt that it was my responsibility to be able to look after my horse and not be dependent on somebody else to maybe show up and do the trim for me. Because in the meantime, it's the horse that suffers if it gets neglected. So even if you don't do your own trims, which I don't blame you because it's darn hard work, if I could find somebody else that I trusted and that would do trims the way I would like them done, I would probably quite gladly pay somebody else to do it because it's hard work. But because I have the obligation to the horse to take care of it, and I have things that I want done my way, well, I might be right or wrong, but that's the easiest way to get it done my way is if I do it. And even if my way isn't necessarily the right way, if you compare the way a lot of different farriers and trimmers actually do work, everybody's got their own little flavor. They think trimming should be done a little bit different one way or the other. And I've witnessed it firsthand. I've watched a number of guys work that all do things a little bit different. And, some of them I looked at them and, wow, that's not what I'd do. And some of them it's like, well, that's strange, but okay. And, whatever. But if you do it yourself, it gets done your way. And if you want to know how you think you should do it, well, get some information. There's lots of information online. It's not that hard to get. Be careful. It's like anything online. You got to take it with a grain of salt. And, some of the methods that people endorse are a little too aggressive, in my opinion. They take a little too much off. That's where I say if you, err on the side of caution. And if you're conservative, you can always take a little more off. It's not a big deal. And it's not any more, well, really, things are bigger and heavier, a little more efforts involved. But there's tricks to that, too. You can always sit down on a stool and do it. People do that, There's a lot of different ways to make things easier. Well, it's just like I decided I'm going to use an angle grinder. And I'm thinking if I use it often enough, Not only am I not going to have to use my rasp anymore, I may never even have to use my nip preserver again. So there's always ways of making your life a little easier. Like I said, it is hard work, but there's always ways of making it a little easier. And in the process, you can see how the horse behaves. If it needs additional training to encourage better behavior for the farrier or trimmer, if you're the one doing it, you can stop and take the time to address those things, as opposed to, farriers and trimmers, they don't want to hang around and train your horse for you for free. If there's a problem, they just want to get it over with and get out of there. That's all they want to do. So, but just like training, people don't want to screw up. They're scared of doing irreparable damage. Well, it's not. Horses are very forgiving. If you do something wrong, you can fix it. And it's pretty much the same with trim and hooves. It's really, in the grand scheme of things, although a little bigger and heavier and harder, it's no different than trimming your fingernail. It's exactly the same material and gets done pretty much exactly the same way. And if you don't trim it too short, never hurts. And you can always take the rasp and take a little bit more off, or go back and trim it again a little more. And remember, it'll always grow back. It's only a matter of time. If you consider a good trim cycle is about every 6 weeks. So even if you do mess up a little bit and take a little too much off somewhere, it's only a matter of a week or so before it's going to be grown out enough you can, give it another little rasp and bring everything down even and fix your problem. So it's really not a big deal. Nothing to be scared of. Get bold. Try new things. Whether it's training or trimming, don't be scared to try. It's a little harder to mess up than you think. Have a good day.